Welcome to the Your Leadership Legacy podcast. My name is Tina Paulus Kraus, and I'm so excited to bring you this next podcast dedicated to you high performers out there who want to reinvent yourself, reinvent your business, maybe your career, all of it. This podcast is all about being dedicated to transformation and being the best possible leader of yourself and others that you can be in order to create a legacy that lives on. Welcome to Your Leadership Legacy. My name is Tina Paulus Kraus. I am the founder and CEO of True You Teams. And here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Your Leadership Legacy. My name is Tina Paulus Kraus, and today we have Renee Moe with us from United Way, and I could not be more excited. Hi, Renee.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And I want to thank you because I know that you are swamped, honking busy right now, flying in a million different directions. So thank you so much for taking time out. I wanted to really just sit down with you and have a really important conversation about what's going on in the world today. So before we do that, I'm going to read your bio because everybody needs to know how amazing you are. I was reading this bio going, oh my gosh. So I want to read that and then we'll get into some juicy questions. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Good. All right.
You so Renee, the bio part, but the juicy question sounds great.
Yeah, right. Okay. So Renee's bio. So Renee Moe is president and CEO of United Way, Dane County, a leader in the worldwide United Way network and across the nonprofit sector. Charity Navigator recently recognized United Way of Dane County in the top 3% of nonprofits, which is amazing. A military kid, I'm a military brat as well, is what we used to be called, right?
Yeah.
Grew up on 3 continents. So Renee has a JBA in Journalism and Mandarin Chinese, an MBA from UW-Madison. She's been recognized with the YWCA Women of Distinction Award, Wisconsin Women of Color Network, Power of Unity Award. She was a Brava Woman to watch. She's a UW Business School 8 under 40 and served as president of the Downtown Rotary. So you can see Renee's service in this community is stellar and outstanding and amazing. United Way's mission is to unite the community to create measurable results and change lives, mobilizing the community's carrying power to stabilize and empower families. Through significant community listening and understanding, community data, United Way prioritizes education, financial stability, health, and how we treat each other as the building blocks of a stable life in thriving Dane County. With thousands of volunteers, tens of thousands of donors, and hundreds of thousands of community relationships, United Way convenes cross-sector collaborations to articulate community-built change plans and metrics, engages the community in giving, advocating, and volunteering to get proximate to issues and resources for these plans, and evaluates progress, strengthening collaborations, and accountability for results. That's a mouthful.
You did a great job. Wow. Yeah. We should simplify that bio.
Right. Yeah. No. It's amazing. So it just really, when I was reading it, it just really brings to life the work that Dane County is doing. So these collaborations have increased graduation rates. They've decreased family homelessness. They've increased employers' hiring pools of diverse and committed employees. And then, like Renee in United Way believes that the potential that lies within all people, this is my favorite part of the whole thing, and are committed to fostering environments that accelerate belief in and empowerment of that potential. A committed advocate for change. Renee lives in Madison with her husband, Jason, and their children, Nick and Nora. So
that's right.
Welcome,
Thank
Renee.
you.
It's so good to have you on the show.
Very kind for you to go through all of that. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I wanted to give those that were listening just a real taste. I've watched you in the community now over the years, and just your service and your dedication and the work that United Way is doing in the community is really, really outstanding, and it proves it, right? The top 3%. So,
well, thank you. And I just want to say also, Tina, your volunteerism, we talk about hundreds of volunteers and tens of thousands of donors and others. You are one of those folks who really champions the work and makes it possible. So I want to thank you not only for your personal commitment, but for also, really being a platform to help more people engage with the work and create change together. So thank you so much for all of you, everything that you do.
Thank you. Yeah, together we win, right? Together we
absolutely.
More, all
it's the power of many working for all.
Exactly. Exactly. That sounds familiar. So tell us, I want to get right down into the juicy, right? Because we are in the middle of a pandemic. And since day one, like literally since day one, United Way has been in the forefront of this in our community. And so talk to us a little bit about what that's been like in the very beginning when you know, the call or whatever happened in the beginning, and how that's kind of evolved through time.
Yeah, so there's been so much going on with that. I mean, I think that, you know, we started being aware of coronavirus in November, December, right? You started hearing some of the international news, having those conversations. The first case in Dane County was February 5th. And shortly thereafter, we had a full staff meeting. And I know at that meeting, we were talking about how do we get ready, start making sure we update our essential business plans for departments. How do we make sure that we're really paying attention to what the community needs? And by a month later, in March, we were doing a needs assessment. So working with public health, who's the lead agency on response, you know, communicating with the mayor, the county executive, the superintendents, the chancellor, and the chamber, right? Really trying to take a look at what's going on in our community and how can we best serve and support. We also did a specific outreach to our business partners. And, you know, there were really three questions that were on my mind. So first was, you know, how is this impacting your organization? Number two, here's what's going on in the community. What questions do you have about that? And number three, is there an interest in a fund to be able to help support with emergency response? And overwhelming support from the business community to be able to say yes to that. So 211 calls were skyrocketing. You know, we had at our peak, we had a 300% increase in people calling. You saw businesses starting to close, you saw schools closing. And so all of a sudden, you know, people without incomes, people without childcare, and, you know, and just a lot of fear also around the health issues and what does that mean and what does safer at home mean for all of us. So the big needs in the nonprofit sector and from not only families who were calling us, but also from agencies and others, childcare for essential workers, right? How do we make sure if there's a spike that healthcare has childcare so that they can, you know, continue to serve and keep us healthy and respond. Food access and rent assistance. So typically what people don't know is when you lose your income, those basic needs are the things that obviously are the highest priority, right? We really pride ourselves at looking at root causes and changing systems to make outcomes more equitable. And when you're in a pandemic, you got to really focus in on those emergency needs. So food and housing. And then, you know, now you're seeing a shift into eviction prevention as well as mental health kinds of services. So, you know, really understanding that context was a big deal. So we activated a number of major donors who really stepped up to say, how can we help? We've raised about $2.5 million so far in COVID-19 response. Boys and Girls Club, Selfless Ambition, Centro Hispano, the Latino Consortium for Action. You know, we're all really trying to work together to make sure that people have what they need in this crisis. And in the meantime, you know, some folks aren't eligible for stimulus checks. A lot of people weren't getting their unemployment insurance. And so how do we help stand in to help people get what they need in real time? So, you know, that was some of the immediate activation. I feel like I'm talking too long for this.
No, I love it. No,
yeah.
no. It's important. I feel like it's important for people to know kind of how that works.
Thank you. So, you know, I would say by middle of March, we were able to then, you know, have those resources starting to come in, starting to be distributed. Boys and Girls Club and Selfless Ambition did the first emergency response sort of short-term need to fill that gap. And then we had a whole committee of volunteers, like we always do, accept proposals from nonprofits to really look at housing, food, and flexible funds. And so, you know, got those dollars distributed very, very quickly. So the opportunity here is continue to listen to what the community needs. We're really paying attention to what's going on with unemployment claims, with 211 calls, you know, and expecting and working to prevent a wave of hunger and homelessness. So looking at how do we partner with nonprofits and our governmental partners to even further streamline and make more efficient the food distribution network and make sure that eviction prevention is more of a holistic system. You know, we've been able to work over the last 15 years to coordinate the homelessness services work. So because of that, we saw a 50% decrease in family homelessness, which has been, you know, phenomenal. And now how do we help coordinate in the same kind of way to actually prevent people from getting evicted in the next few months? We know that landlords, many of them are small business owners, so, you know, they need to manage their expenses and their incomes. But certainly, you know, once you tip into homelessness, that creates a whole nother set of circumstances. We also have a lot of federal money flooding in right now and trying to work and trying to really advocate for a systems approach to make sure that we're doing the best practice to get people stably housed and independent as soon as possible, knowing the economic recovery is going to take quite a while, and knowing the disproportionate impact on people of color and low-income folks who get sicker, die more, and will have a slower access to that recovery. In Dane County, we're projected to be one of the best places to recover. And now's the time to really think through, how do we have more access to that?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
And if that wasn't a full plate already,
Yeah.
within the last week, we've seen, we've seen some of the things going on with race and police
Absolutely.
stuff
Absolutely.
like that. So how does that, from where you're standing and from where you're sitting, how does that, like, how do you even manage all that? How do you tackle all that? How do you move forward?
It is a lot to tackle, right? But those two things, they're interconnected. So what I really want people to understand is when you're talking about racial injustice, when you're talking about historic trauma, and sort of the legacies that our society is built upon, which includes, you look at, we had 250 years of slavery in our country. That meant how do you keep a free workforce compliant? You separate families, right? Moms from babies and husbands from wives. You deny education, and you use violence to be able to, keep that workforce compliant. And so we've had 150 years since slavery ended officially in the country. And, for the first 100 of that, it was still legal to discriminate, right? And so when you think about where does this all come from in terms of the social unrest, we've been hearing Black voices, brown voices for literally hundreds of years saying, how unfair this is, and just to be looking at the color of somebody's skin and denying access, how wrong that is. And now in the last few decades, we have real evidence and data to bear that out, right? Now, on one hand, it's very helpful because it allows folks to really say, oh, this is researched in a white PhD person and a Black PhD person. The Black person will still be sicker, die sooner, make less, have less access, right? So there is a fundamental issue with race in what's going on in our community. So, on one hand, people are saying, why don't you just listen and believe? And on the other hand, we're saying, okay, let's look at the evidence and let's look at this and make this, a more rational decision if that's the way we can consume the information. But the bottom line is there are really, disturbing underpinnings in terms of where we've come from. Now, none of us was around 400 years ago, right? None of us was around, 300 years ago. But what can we do today? We can acknowledge the history, and we can really think through, the voices of what's coming out, and, the egregiousness of an, 8, 9, 10-minute video of someone who is supposed to uphold the safety and security and our trust in the world, putting their knee on a Black man's neck and until his life is, completely snuffed out. That is horrifying. And I think that to see that pattern repeated again and again and again, this outrage that's coming and this pain that is coming, and, the opportunity to say, okay, can we now believe, what does it take to make those changes to ensure that you can't tell who's going to graduate, who's going to make money, who's going to be incarcerated based on the color of somebody's skin, right? That's all people are asking for. Like, what is the fairness? We talk about freedom and justice for all, right? And that's really it. That's all, right? How do we make sure that the things that we are founded on, the things we believe, are actually true for every American resident? So, it complicates things in that there is so much emotion. Everyone is along the spectrum in a different place. And so, a lot of people who are just kind of raising consciousness to like, whoa, I had no idea. That's so hard, right? Because there are all these emotions and feelings to go through: anger, denial, guilt, all the stages of grief that are completely normal and healthy. And, how do we get to the point of these are the kinds of things we can do? So that's kind of context setting. So what specifically is United Way doing? So we are very lucky in our community that we have had since 2014. It's led by United Way of Dane County and the NAACP Dane County. It's called the Law Enforcement Leaders of Color Collaboration. And the whole purpose of that group is to build trust. And it came about as a result of Chief Sue Reisling, who was at the UW police. And she said, you know, what happened in Ferguson could happen in Dane County. And let's make sure that we've got the bridges built before something like that happens. And so in those conversations, we really talked about use of force, implicit bias, and recruitment, right? Diverse recruitment. And shortly thereafter, Tony Robinson's shooting happened. And so the ability to have really important, hard conversations with those constituencies, the community of law enforcement and the community of color leaders, we did that work to say, what are the use of force recommendations? What needs to be done and changed? And then you've had a lot of other agencies doing that work too, right? There's a national task force on use of force. You had locally an OIR report, an ad hoc report in the city of Madison. So there's a lot of, here's what to do. And now the question is, how fast are we doing that? And so really where we're spending our time is continuing to keep people at the table to try to work through, how do we get through this together, and how do we make the systemic changes that have to happen to make sure that policing is safe for everybody. And right now I have a lot of compassion as well for law enforcement who are doing their jobs and who are just representative of that thing that needs to change. And it is so hard as individuals to represent a system and represent history in how we all rise up and make sure that we stay focused on that humanitarian response that we need as people and making those systemic changes that we need as a society. So there's a lot of that going on. And there's much, much, much more in that space too, but I think those are the key areas to really zoom in on.
Right. Yeah. So if I'm listening to this and I'm hearing social media is all over the place and we're hearing news and all that kind of stuff, right? And people are in different spots. So one of the things that I'm hearing a lot of is people are like, I'm mad, I'm just mad. And they've got all these emotions and stuff like that. And that's part of the awakening. You mentioned, right? Like this is part of our awakening. And because our society is so used to believing we have to be perfect, right? We're scared to say anything. We're scared to use our voice. So what advice would you give somebody who's listening to this right now? And they're here, like they get it. They understand it. They want to help, but they're just not sure how to start or how to get going. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think the best advice is just to start, right? I mean, by putting yourself out there and knowing it's not going to be perfect, by knowing you've got a lot to learn. And I'm saying this for every person in whatever position, whatever point of view. I mean, the point is to start trying, right? I mean, most people of color don't have any sort of expectation for perfection, right? People know that we're all along the way. Everyone's a different person. And we all have different experiences, different levels of engagement. But the most important ask is to start, right? So believe something needs to be changed. That's number one. Like something in the air tells us that something's not working for everybody, right? So believe that, number one, and then try to engage. First, the levels of comfort and safety and protection. The biggest things, people don't want to make a mistake, right? They don't want to put themselves out there to be the bad guy. And I'm saying, try, just put yourself out there and say, I think this is wrong. I think this could be better. And, if you get, lashback or feedback that says, how could you feel that way? Know that's part of the journey of exploring, and part of a democracy is really, how do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes to get to a broader worldview, right? And this isn't about being right or wrong. This is really about engaging in, what is real, what is truth, what do you stand for, what are your values? And I think that an important, piece of all of this is, silence is complicit, right? I think a lot of times people feel like silence is the right thing to do. That is the professional thing to do. That is the safe thing to do, right? And it is safer. But if there's any part of you that feels like it's not okay for a law enforcement officer to put their knee on somebody's neck and have their life snuffed out, then, what's that little question? It's not just one bad apple, right? This has happened enough times. And in that particular space. So what is going on? We know there are wonderful, wonderful law enforcement leaders and great cops, and something's going on, right? So engage with that. What is that thing that's going on? When you look at who gets access, in the core of our work, right, in education, financial stability, and health, looking at outcomes when we talk about a racial achievement gap or an opportunity gap, when we talk about disparities in education, graduation rates, income attainment, and incarceration, what's going on inside of that? When whole categories of people are not thriving, it's not the people, there's something wrong with the system, right? And so that is the kind of advice I would say. Number one, just start. You're not going to be perfect. You will make mistakes. It will absolutely be uncomfortable. Number two, own that as part of the experience of being an even better contributor. Once you get through that hard, you're going to feel even better. And to be able to actively do something and to engage in the discomfort is actually very, very satisfying and will make you happier in the long run. So if you can kind of trust that, I think that's important.
Yeah.
Have I ever told you my family motto story?
No, please tell.
Speaking of family, I've got, my nice.
I was going to ask you about that. Tell us about that too, please.
My daughter yesterday came downstairs and she said, "Oh, you need to have a decoration." So she picked this up. And then she drew, that's a United Way logo. And so, and she used duct tape on the wall, which the painter's tape didn't stick. So, so here's the story. When my son was about 3, I dropped him off at daycare. And as I walked out of the classroom, I said, "Onward." And his teacher said, "Upward." And my little guy, not wanting to be left out, said, "Awkward." And right? It's hilarious. And so I called my husband and I said, "Oh my gosh, the cutest thing just happened." And he said that would make a great family motto.
Yes.
So, when my daughter came along, we wanted her to be part of the family lore. So, she got to decorate, a sign with her own artwork of those words. And, my point is, to keep going, to keep getting better, it has to be awkward, right? I mean,
it's going to get messy.
It's going to get messy. And if you are not uncomfortable, you're not growing. And every one of us, this is a podcast about leadership, right? The most important part of leadership is that discomfort of growing and figuring out how to do things better and to, how do we bring others along with us? And so, there's a long answer to your question, but what's the advice? Get uncomfortable, just start, just try, read a little bit more, try to figure out what is going on here. What's my role? How do I become someone who can help advocate? You're not blaming people, you're not calling people out, but just in the ether, in the conversation, to say, I do think things could be better. I do think there's an opportunity here.
It was a personal example of this for me yesterday. So it's Blackout Day yesterday. So I was participating in this and I used the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And I got a phone call immediately. I'm sorry, it wasn't a phone call, it was a message. And I got the message immediately telling me, it was an explanation and telling me why. And like my immediate response was like, "Oh my God, I messed up." Like, "Oh my God," And when we just pause and go, okay, I'm going to ask a question. Why, what is wrong? Oh, because it's clogging up the rest. Oh, now I understand. So like when we really just pause ourselves and look internal and just say, what am I curious about right now? And start asking questions. It's amazing how the outcome changes.
Absolutely.
And and it is. This is about self-leadership. And as you were talking, like self-leadership, I just wrote an article on LinkedIn about this yesterday. Imagine a world, Renee, where we all developed our own self-leadership and we all rose up within ourselves.
That's right.
Collectively, what that would do to this world.
And that is so powerful because, the individual change leads to the organizational change, which leads to the systemic change, right? And so that is the core work that needs to happen. And I think self-leadership for any profession, any family, any friend group, right? I mean, that's the constant thing. I always tell our team, you should ask always, what could I have done differently? What did I learn from this? And so I love that you encapsulate that in self-leadership, because I do imagine a world where there was a heightened ability to not feel defensive. And like you just said, right? Like someone said, hey, there's a different way you could do this. And instead of going, oh my gosh, I screwed up, to go, oh, thank you. Or getting defensive, right? And saying, oh, thanks for teaching me. And you don't have to agree with it, right? But to let yourself be open to that different perspective allows you to then form a more complete picture, because you have more data that you can then, process in your brain. So I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah. What are you most proud of Dane County right now?
Oh, I think that the helping that comes out, right? The aspiration to be the community that we all expect ourselves to be. I'm so proud of that, right? The ability to sort of say, we want to be the best place to live. We want to be on every best place list. And we want to make that a reality for every resident, right? I mean, that part is very inspiring. And so, that makes me super proud. And, you look at within such a short amount of time frame to say, hey, we need help. People are needing help right now. And to raise $2.5 million like that, to be able to say we need volunteers. The mayor is saying coordinate all of these different groups. How do we inspire more people to be able to, do more of that work and volunteer and help? Like that's very inspirational. And the willingness to sort of take that step back and to understand the contextual part of what's happening, and then to reimagine better going forward. Right, I'm super proud of that as well.
Awesome. So many possibilities.
Oh
like
my gosh, so many.
We get to rewrite the future. How exciting is that?
Yes, that's so exciting. It's so exciting.
Yeah. So I always ask this question at the end of a podcast, and like we've already talked about your legacy. So I'm interested to see how you're going to answer this, but the podcast is called Your Leadership Legacy. And so my question to you is, what leadership are you aspiring to lead? Or I'm sorry, what legacy are you aspiring to?
Well, I think on the work front, how do you build toward a Dane County where everyone can succeed in schoolwork and life, right? How do you mobilize that caring power to get that done? And here's a quote that I love. This is from Lao Tzu. He's a Chinese philosopher. A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say we did it ourselves. And to me, that is really the legacy is how do you empower the community to really step up and make sure that, we are who we say we are who we believe we are, and make that possible for even more people.
Yeah. And from kind of the outside looking in, over the past several months, like I've never been more proud to live in this community because I've seen it in so many different aspects of people just really stepping into their power and stepping into their leadership and exploring and learning and so really, really proud of that. And you're definitely leaving that legacy. So I want to honor you and acknowledge you for that.
Thank you, Tina. Well, we do it together.
We do absolutely.
Together. Yeah.
For your leadership. All right. Yeah. So any last parting words or anything like that for people before we let you go?
Yeah. Well, I just thank you so much for allowing this conversation to happen, and just to remind people to be uncomfortable, right? Get awkward. We're all growing, and that is the journey. There is no right answer, and we will not solve racial injustice in our lifetimes. So I think just staying true to it is the journey, it is the progress, it is the ongoing attention to what does it take to provide access to education, financial stability, health, and how we treat each other, right? And how we treat each other is really, that's so important, and that's really the magic. So keep going, keep being awkward.
Awesome. Yes, let's get messy.
That's right. Let's get messy.
All right. Well, thank you. I want to thank you for being on the show. I can't wait for people to hear it. So
thank you, Tina.
Amazing. All right, you guys, that ends this episode of Your Leadership Legacy. Until next time, we'll see you then. Bye. My name is Tina Paulus-Krause, and I thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show. Check out our programs and events at truuteams.com. And until next time, make it an amazing day.